Hello everyone, happy 30th anniversary to both Pulp Fiction and Wes Craven's New Nightmare. This will be a double feature video with my memories and retrospective of the films. In the 90s you had a wave of indie filmmakers change filmmaking forever, bring a new era of film to cinemas. And it changed festivals, it changed what you thought of an independent film, and it just changed everything. It harkened back to some of the films we saw in the 70s. It kind of got away from what we saw in the 80s. Became more grittier. You had younger voices, different perspectives showing. And Pulp Fiction was one of those films. You know, Quentin Tarantino was hot off of Reservoir Dogs, did Pulp Fiction, and this was a film that I was aware of in pop culture, even though I was only 3 when it came out. Like, I remember Space Jam even made reference to it with the Looney Tunes, but like my brother and father went to go see this in theaters. My brother's about 15 years older than me, so he had the VHS, and I remember that iconic poster of Uma Thurman. And then even before seeing the film, I was aware of the soundtrack, an iconic theme song. All the songs are just awesome. This has one of the best movie soundtracks. And my brother also watched From Dusk Till Dawn, that was written by Tarantino. I watched Jackie Brown. That was probably the first Tarantino film I remember seeing because it wasn't as violent as the others. But I really did not get into Quentin Tarantino's filmography until the release of Kill Bill Volume 1. And I thought that was like the most awesome, gory, bloody fun time I've had in a movie. I love Kill Bill. You can check out my retrospective of Volume 2 on the channel. But around that time, you know, I was wanting to become a filmmaker, and I was getting into Quentin Tarantino's filmography. They showed this all the time on AMC, and little did I know how much they edited it compared to the actual version. So I guess it was around the time of the 10th year anniversary in 2004 where I got the special edition DVD, the 2-disc one that actually showed them winning the Palme d'Or at Cannes Film Festival, the behind the scenes, and I was a big John Travolta fan, you know. Saturday Night Fever, another awesome movie with an amazing soundtrack. That was a film that inspired me to become a filmmaker, one of the films, that and Mad Max. And Saturday Night Fever just changed my life. So as a John Travolta fan, seeing him also on The Punisher that year, I wanted to check out Pulp Fiction. And my dad was at a meeting, so my mom took me to a Walmart. And for $9.99, I miss it when DVDs were cheap. Like I miss it when new movies were like under $20. And that movie changed everything. I love seeing the actual version. A lot more language, a lot more violence. The iconic theme at the beginning. A Royale with cheese. You had that line. Jules, Vincent Vega. You had Uma Thurman as Mia Wallace. Ving Rhames as Marcellus Wallace. Oh man, pride. I love that speech with Bruce Willis. That was awesome. Eric Stoltz in this. Christopher Walken, small cameo. You have Harvey Keitel. Quentin Tarantino has a cameo. Who could forget Amanda Plummer and Tim Roth? And it was a different movie in the fact that it was non-linear, so it was out of order. And only later on did I kind of see the tales of forgiveness and characters that were willing to change and forgive each other and how they were spared versus those living violent lives. You know, there's a certain religious thematic element to that film in Pulp Fiction, but it was just great seeing this film with these different stories all connect in a non-linear way. Now, wouldn't it have been as good if it was told in order? I don't know. That's what's kind of the charm of it, you know. John Travolta gets killed halfway through the movie, but he's still around because it takes place before that event. So that's kind of nice to see, you know. And who could forget Mia Wallace's and Vincent Vega's dance? Girl, You'll Be a Woman Soon, the overdose scene. Oh, man. So many iconic moments in this film, all the way to the end with the diner. It was the shepherd and divine intervention, you know. And then who could forget Phil LaMarr? Yeah, the voice of the Green Lantern. Oh man, I shot Marv in the face. Why the hell did you do that for? That was funny. And my brother and dad said people laughed in the theater. And I didn't get to experience that, not until another 10 years later. On the 20th anniversary, me and my filmmaker friend Phil, who is an RTF with me at UT, fellow filmmaker, we went to a Pulp Fiction quote-along at Alamo Draft House in Austin, Alamo Ritz when it was open. And that was something. I was dressed in a suit and everything, and they're giving out prizes, and the person's like, you came dressed up. Okay, you get everything. So I got like some candy cigarettes, a syringe pen, and a cap gun. And they wouldn't do this now, but like every time someone would get shot in the film, or Vincent and Jules would shoot people, you would have to fire a cap gun at the screen. Oh, it made the quote along too, is that look at the big name on Brad instead of Brett. They actually kept the mess up in there in the quote along. That was funny. But that was something watching in theaters. I loved watching this on DVD. Later upgraded to 4K. quite recently, but like it's one of those where like, there's some movies where you can still enjoy and they're considered classics even without experiencing them in cinemas. I did that on Jaws, I did that on Star Wars, but Pulp Fiction is one of those that really felt different on the big screen in the cinema. Like that was a completely different experience. Still a great movie either way, but like it was just more it was more of a transformative, immersive experience, so to speak, on the big screen. And 30 years later, this is probably like one of my favorites, if not my favorite, Tarantino film with Inglourious Basterds. Like I love Pulp Fiction. Kill Bill 2 is awesome, and yeah, it's just so iconic. The iconography of this film is just unique, and there hasn't really been anything like it. They've had some spiritual... I guess there are some movies that in spirit feel like a Tarantino film, like Bad Times at El Royale or some other films, but like... This is just one of a kind, and in the golden era, I feel, of Quentin Tarantino, there's a lot of people... Once Upon a Time in Hollywood's a great film, but there's a lot of people that kind of went and saw his films later in his filmography, and I just feel like Reservoir Dogs, Pulp Fiction, and Jackie Brown are still golden, There's just something about the story I feel is richer, even though the films looked grittier and less polished than his later on films. Something about these first three films are just cinema to me, just pure gold, and I just think it's a great set of three films in his filmography starting out. So, yep, those are just my memories of Pulp Fiction. I absolutely love this film. The soundtrack, I love that. I love the soundtrack, and who could forget the Gimp? That was horrible. I loved Marcellus shooting that racist cop. Time to go medieval on your ass, Who could forget Bruce Willis, the Golden Watch thing, and then it's just like, whose bike is this? Zed. Who's Zed? Zed's dead, honey. Zed's dead. Tarantino, Richard Linklater, Robert Rodriguez, Steven Soderbergh, all these indie filmmakers, Kevin Smith, they ushered in a new wave of cinema with indie film in the 90s in the way that like De Palma, Scorsese, Coppola, Lucas, and Spielberg ushered in a new wave of film in the late 60s, early 70s. And yeah, we're still riding on it. And I think, personally, being a part as a filmmaker, I think I've seen a lot of fellow filmmakers, fellow peers. I think there's going to be another wave of indie filmmakers and new stories coming very soon. I know it feels like Hollywood's imploding, but I feel like we're about to hit another wave. That's just my thoughts. Anyway, let me know your thoughts and memories of Pulp Fiction down in the comments below. If you want to stay, we're going to talk about another film that was released on the same day, on October 14th of 1994, called Wes Craven's New Nightmare. Wes Craven's New Nightmare. This is the 7th installment of the Nightmare on Elm Street series. I went over this many years ago, but today it turns 30 years old. And this, I feel, is not only a severely underrated film, but a Wes Craven film, and a severely underrated Elm Street entry. This is meta. This was meta before Scream, before Matrix Resurrections. Yeah, this film was like Last Action Hero for horror films as far as Freddy Krueger coming out of the movie world into the real world as this other evil entity. And I loved seeing Heather Langenkamp come back, not only as herself, but as Nancy. There's just something about like having some good sequels and then a bunch of mediocre sequels to have our original actress come back in the 7th installment. I mean, Halloween did it with H2O, and this did it before. With Heather Langenkamp, you have John Saxon back, Robert Englund plays himself, and a new redesigned Freddy. And I absolutely love this from Wes Craven, This is a solid trilogy with one, Dream Warriors, and New Nightmare. And it's not really connected to the Elm Street films, It ended with Freddy's dead, but this is almost like an epilogue/commentary on the entire Freddy Nightmare on Elm Street franchise. And this is beautiful, seeing Wes Craven come up with this original story, but then also make a commentary on what happened to his idea and how they just basically milked it dry and franchised it in so many different ways where they diluted it. Freddy wasn't scary anymore, so he kind of brought back terror to Freddy Krueger in a way. It's crazy how they had earthquakes and how it related to the real earthquakes going on in California around that time. It's just nuts, but I remember seeing this on HBO. My brother-in-law, many of you may have heard this if you've been on the channel before, but if you haven't, he showed me Nightmare on Elm Street, the original, when I was 6 years old, and it scared the living shit out of me. And it wasn't until I saw Dream Warriors on Sci-Fi, where I saw people fight back against Freddy, that I wasn't scared, and then I kind of got into it. It became my favorite, and plus my name's Frederick, and it's Freddy, and yeah, Freddy's ready for anything. Elm Street on Halloween. And I saw this on HBO, and I was a huge fan of Wes Craven. I greatly miss the man. He was one of a kind. I really miss him. I really feel his absence, especially around Halloween and stuff. He was a filmmaker that inspired me as well, and I used to read some of the novels he wrote. I love this film and the idea it has, and how like there is this ancient evil that gets trapped in stories and shows the importance of storytelling. But then also showing Heather Langenkamp, all the actors play kind of these characterized versions of themselves. They're more exaggerated versions of themselves. I love that. And then the little kid, yeah, he was great. See Dylan's New Nightmare. It's a cool fan film that follows this film. I love it. You can check out my thoughts on that, but this film did not do well at the box office. I mean, horror films weren't really doing that great until Scream came about in the mid '90s. Everybody kind of got tired in the '80s, you know. I used to see a bunch of horror films on the video shelves, but this had the misfortune of coming out the same day as Pulp Fiction, so it didn't do well. And it's sad because I think it found a second life on home video and on cable, and it did. This is such an underrated film. And again, before Scream or even Scream 3, Wes Craven went meta on horror films in Hollywood before those films in this film. And this is such an intelligent film. I mean, is it the scariest? No, it's not as scary as, say, the original Elm Street or some of its sequels. But it is taken seriously. Freddy's not a joke, and it's done in an intelligent way where even if you're not a fan of horror films or slashers, I think you're going to enjoy this film and find something out of it. I love how fantasy and reality began to bleed through in this film. And then who could forget the reunion between Robert Englund and Heather Langenkamp when he is Freddy, where he's just like, miss me, and he's through the closet. I just love that. And how it kind of ties back to Hansel and Gretel. The part where Wes Craven's talking about needing to write a story and seeing what he's talking about with Heather Langenkamp show up on his keyboard on the computer, on the screenplay he's writing. This is so trippy, man. I love meta stuff like that. This is such a cool film. And this is a solid conclusion to the Elm Street series. I mean, there's an eighth one if you count Freddy vs. Jason in the remake, but to me, this will always be the conclusion of the Elm Street series. Whether you count 1, 3, or 7, or whether you count all of them, this is a perfect conclusion and ends Freddy on a high with his original creator, Wes Craven. Anyway, those are just my thoughts on Pulp Fiction and Wes Craven's New Nightmare. Let me know your thoughts and memories down below. Let me know your memories of Wes Craven's New Nightmare. What's your favorite Nightmare on Elm Street entry? What's your favorite Tarantino film? Let me know down in the comments below. In the meantime, you can check out these other videos for more content. Stay safe and healthy, everyone. Have a happy Halloween.